Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bright Ideas podcast. As always, I am your host, Trent Deersmid, and this is the show where I share the stories of some of today's leading entrepreneurs, and more importantly, to extract from them all those actionable golden nuggets that you can implement in your business starting today. So on the show with me today is a fellow by the name of Geoff Atkinson from a company called Huckabuy. Geoff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Trent. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
So Huckabuy is a search engine optimization software company based in Park City, Utah. And my background comes from overstock.com. So I learned a lot about SEO there, took it from a channel of 0 to 300 million. And what I realized was sort of missing in the industry was the technical solution for SEO. So websites are built for humans, but I argue in any given day that a search bot is actually the most important visitor because they're going to dictate how many humans come to the site.
Mm-hmm.
And so we work on what the UI UX is for a bot rather than for a human being, and optimize that conversation between websites and search engines so that the more they understand, the more search traffic they end up getting as a result.
Cool. So when did you start the company?
So I started the company, let's see, it's been about 5 years, but the first 2 years we were actually a B2C site. So we were an affiliate site that was struggling, but we had built some really cool SEO automation software, and people that knew the business wanted to start licensing it, and it was our fastest path towards revenue. So we pivoted about 3.5 years ago into a B2B software company.
Okay. So that kind of answers my next question of why you decided to start an SEO firm, but I want to make sure that we don't leave anything unturned. Was it just because folks that were in your sphere of influence were reaching out to you because they'd seen you were getting some kind of results, or was there any other contributing factor into, hey, we're going to do this?
It was really blind luck, to be honest with you, Trent. At the time, Google made an algorithm update that really hindered the success of affiliate sites. So for you to rank well on the e-commerce side, you usually have to carry and sell the product directly. And so we were really swimming upstream. Having my background at Overstock with a pretty credible, run of SEO, people saw sort of the value of what we had built in the website and wanted it for their own sites. And so, yeah, friends of mine were really the first customers. And it was just like blind luck that we ended up in software. I didn't even realize sort of the value of the recurring revenue, software model and the multiples that the software companies get. So yeah. All of a sudden I got all this like interest in investors and stuff like that without even realizing, that we were building something that was a lot different than your typical e-commerce play. So that was just sort of fortunate luck that we ended up there. Mm-hmm. And then we got lucky to get some really big customers early, like SAP and Salesforce, that kind of made us credible and able to grow pretty quickly.
So those first couple of big customers, you say luck, but luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity in my books. Was it really just luck, or was it folks that came from your network that had seen what you'd done for years and all the track record that you'd put together? I mean, they don't just fall out of the sky.
Yeah. Some were colleagues that I'd had for a long time. I'd say like that the very first big deal that we did was with SAP. Mm-hmm. And SAP, one of their VPs of marketing actually lives in Park City, and we had become friends. And so he's like, I'd love to try this on one of our domains. And we did it. And structured data in particular was the product. They were the automation of sort of world-class structured data, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it was, we tried it, and the numbers were so incredible. I mean, they were growing triple digits within 6 months that we had sort of that first validation and case study that was like, okay, this really works well, especially on enterprise customers. And then we also had, we had a sort of, we were playing a little inside baseball at Salesforce as well, where we had a connection with them and got live on their app exchange. So yeah, of course, I'd say, a big part of the beginning of Huckabuy's revenue stream was colleagues and people that I'd known throughout my career. And that's just what you got to scrap, right? When you're early stage startup, that no matter what the concept is, your first customers and sort of your initial revenue is going to most likely be, people that and you need to get into the mindset, which was hard for me to do actually, but you have to sell friends, right? You have to convince your friends that what you're doing is legit and it's actually going to help them. And fortunately, we had a product that really worked well. So I felt confident that if they got it live and they used it, that they were actually going to get good results and be advocates. And that fortunately came true.
Mm-hmm. And in your case, you'd already developed the product because you built it for yourself initially, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it was initially just for our website. It was the automation of really good structured data markup, which is what we saw at Overstock, and then I saw is really like the future of how Google wanted to be talking with websites. And so we were sort of the first product in that space, and it was coming at a time where Google was talking about it a lot, and they really were trying to get sites on structured data. So it was good timing as well, because our product kind of, it's not really a sexy product, but it was getting kind of hot at the time that you needed to be doing this, and we had a great solution for it.
So eventually we'll call it the friends and family list always runs dry, because you only know so many people, and you've got to then, go out into the wild, wild west and attract clients where there was no pre-existing relationship. So how are you attracting clients these days? I'm thinking it's probably a lot of SEO, no surprise. Maybe
It is a
combined
lot.
with some other activities.
Yeah, it is. You got to get really creative though. I mean, when you're starting a company, you have a domain authority of 0, right? So the SEO path takes time, but we really do see it as, we see, our customers that are software companies, their greatest ROI channel is SEO. So we're definitely drinking our own Kool-Aid and trying to get that channel optimized. So I think that really is going to be our long-term sort of scalable solution. But there was a lot of work that had to happen, up until now we're starting to get a trickle of leads coming through organic search and other things. But we would do a lot of outbound email under my name. I happen to have I come from a college that has a extremely loyal alumni group that we leveraged, and I would just, send a bunch of emails to Dartmouth alums, and they would get back to you almost every single time. And so like Concur, huge customer of ours, the chief revenue officer in North America was a Dartmouth alum, and he like gladly took my phone call just because I went to Dartmouth, which is, that you kind of have to find those tricks where it's like, what the outbound, how do you get people to pick up the phone and want to take a call and learn about this product? And, we've tried a lot of them, but you do have to get quite creative. I think that alumni connection's an awesome sort of one that works really well for us. But yeah, a lot of outbound, and then, networks of networks. So now we have executives and we have board members, and we want to go through their whole network. So I don't think we're not out of the phase of still like tapping into friends and family and, LinkedIn connections and such, but we're definitely growing out of it and needing to replace that sort of easy, transaction to a much more normal, organic, they find the site, they learn about the product, they get into our sales pipeline.
So where's your company at today in terms of whatever number, did you raise money from investors, by the way?
We just closed in late December our seed round, so $2.3 million round of funding. We're at about 15 employees, and our run rate on revenue is about 1.5 million.
Okay. Were you profitable when you raised the seed, or were you bleeding or break even? Or?
So actually we weren't profitable. And then I realized that if we became profitable, investors would, and didn't need the money, all of a sudden we become a lot more attractive. So we were fortunate to get the company to a point of profitability that we were just like, oh, we don't need you anymore. And then we became very attractive to potential investors. So that's one tip I would suggest, is like, if you can get your startup to get to break even or profitable, and you don't need the money, you're going to get a lot better terms. You're going to be a lot more attractive, and they're going to have a lot more interest.
Yeah. So I'm going to go down that rabbit hole just for a little minute, because it relates very personally to what I'm doing. I don't know if you recall or not, but I also have a SaaS company.
Yep.
It's only a year old. It's never done any of its own marketing. It's fed largely off of my personal brand. And I think our
Yep.
run rate's about $100,000 in ARR right now. But because of my other businesses, I have lots of cash in other
Yep.
places, and I don't know if I'll ever need to raise money, but at some point in time, you think about the opportunity cost of, well, scaling organically on cash flow versus raising money. So the
Mm-hmm.
goal is to get to profitability before we go and talk to investors.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like, for you, that was a very, very good idea. You said you got more leverage with them, or better terms. Is there one or two or three specific things that you can point to and say, we got this because, we weren't bleeding like crazy and really didn't need the money?
I think we got, I won't give you the exact terms, but I'd say that we got, VCs started to get competitive against one another, trying to get in on this deal. And so once you have, we actually had 300K of it in through angel investors. So that's why it's 2.3. It was 2 million that we really were raising, but friends actually wanted to get in on this round. So we had 300K
Sure.
in the door already, and then there was 200. There's 2 million left, and we had our lead want to take 1 million plus, and so there wasn't a lot left. And then it starts to get competitive, and you want that sort of fear of missing out, right? The FOMO, where
Yeah.
they're all of a sudden, and in Utah's, I'm sure, sort of like where you're at, there's only so many VCs, so they all know each other, they all talk together, and if you become, this was my first time raising a round of institutional money, and I'll be honest, it took me 9 months. So it took me 9 months to close this round. It was a ton of work, and just at the end was sort of that realization, okay, if I turn this company profitable, all of a sudden all the ducks started to fall into line, because we didn't need their money. They got more interested, right, all of a sudden. And then there was that kind of fear of missing out. So we ended up with the two investors, the two institutional investors that we wanted. And it worked out actually really well, despite taking 9 months and a ton of time and energy to get it done.
Yeah. And the two are local?
Yep. Album VC, formerly known as Peak Ventures, and then Kickstart Seed Fund, who's is probably the most active here in Utah.
Okay. And so you basically, I would assume you probably just networked your way into those conversations, as opposed to, filling out an app on a web form.
Yeah. The main lead investor was introduced to me years ago, and he'd always wanted to potentially invest in Huckabuy. We met through a college friend of mine who's really gone on to do incredible things in the VC world. I reached out to him and I said, probably every VC in the country. If you were to pick one in Utah to fund Huckabuy, what would it be? And he said, you got to talk to my friend Diogo. And Diogo ended up being our lead investor probably 4 years after I met him.
Okay. All right. So we're going to come back out of the investor rabbit hole and continue along with client acquisition. So you started to do outreach over and above just kind of the personal network. Did you ramp up a cold email program where you were sending 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 emails a week, or like what scale did you take your outreach to?
We've kind of tested it at all different levels. So we've gone from like highly personalized, sort of 10 to 15 a day type emails, all the way up to thousands a week.
Yeah.
And then sort of figured out somewhere in the mix there what the right amount and so there's like volume, right? And then there's how much personal touch can you put into each one of these. And so we've sort of found a pretty good balance. I wouldn't say that we're like experts at it by any means, but we have had some like extremely successful campaigns that have generated, sizable chunks of revenue. So, but yeah, you got to try it all. You got to try. It's not just also like the emails; it's who you're sending them to, the subject lines, how are you, sequences. Usually it's like around your third or fourth touch they finally get back to you. So, yeah, it's been an interesting. So I ran email marketing too at Overstock, and that's like, 10% off sales and coupons. And this is such a different beast to try to get people that are so busy and they get so many touches a day, how do you get them to like respond? And that's been a really kind of fun challenge for us to figure out.
Yep. How many clients do you think you've landed from cold email?
Probably. So we have about 60 customers, and I bet like 40, 40, majority
So
of our
big
customers
chunk.
are big chunk. Yep.
Okay. So clearly it's an effective strategy for you. And what's again, engagement size in terms of monthly or annual revenue? What does it typically look like for you guys?
Yeah. 2 to 4,000 a month. So we're pretty
Okay.
large contract size.
Okay.
Well, not huge, but, and then for larger domains like SAP and Salesforce, we'll actually have multiple domain deals, and
Yeah.
it starts getting a little bit more pricey, but your typical customer's paying between two and $4,000 a month.
Okay. When you decided to do the outbound campaigns, of course, you got to target an audience. Can you walk me through how you did that? Did you just fire up Sales Navigator and put some criterias in, some job descriptions, and go, boom, give me a list, or was it different?
I'd say our two most sort of successful campaigns in terms of who the audience we're going after. One was Dartmouth alumni. Dartmouth alumni will do anything for one another. So they just always say, yeah, I'll take a meeting, which is just very fortunate.
Yeah, that doesn't.
And the other, no, it's wonderful. And then the other is Utah has a ton of software companies. So this is, they call it Silicon Slopes now. And between Salt Lake City and Provo, there's probably, 1,000 software companies.
Really?
And so, yeah, it's insane. I mean, think about, Qualtrics and Domo and Master Control, and there's there's so many big software companies in Salt Lake. It's really taken off. So we've done a lot of Utah, and then in person, either take them to lunch or go to their office or have them come to our office. So we find that in-person touch really still makes a really big difference. Being able to meet in person and like figure out what their problems are and how to solve them and stuff like that. So sort of our best success come through the alumni network, and then Utah specifically, we have a ton of customers in Utah. And now we're starting to target by region. So we'll go. Last month, we spent a week in San Francisco, both visiting customers and taking new meetings, and then we'll do the same thing in New York, and then we'll do the same thing in LA. So we're starting to just realize the importance, especially sort of an enterprise software sale, of meeting face to face, meeting the CEO, all that sort of stuff makes a big difference.
How long's your sales cycle?
6 weeks on average.
Okay, so meet, intro call, proposal, contract negotiation, close.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. There's usually a little bit of analysis that we'll do on their behalf in the mix there. So, looking at their tech stack, telling them how much benefit they're going to get, walking them through what growth would mean to their business from an SEO perspective. But yeah, pretty
so in your targeting, because you mentioned tech stack, I think of some tools that say, hey, show me a list of everybody that's using HubSpot as an example. Mm-hmm. And of course you can pull that data off their website if you're using the right tools. Show me a list of everyone that's using Salesforce or pretty much any web app where there's going to be any type of JavaScript on their website. Mm-hmm. Have you used stuff like that to identify companies based upon using a specific application as a means of customizing your email and getting your foot in the door?
Just started. Can't tell you how the success rate is because we literally are just starting it. We have a product called SEO Cloud that essentially delivers this like perfect version of a site for Google. It's super fast. It's and we have a partnership with Cloudflare on it, and Cloudflare's kind of become the world leader in terms of a CDN, content delivery network. So mm-hmm. We have a partnership with them, and our SEO Cloud is backed by Cloudflare. That's some of the technology that we use to accomplish this. And so, yeah, we've started to now analyze, using these tools, exactly what you're talking about, figure out who's on Cloudflare and specifically saying, hey, we have an enhancement that's really easy to install as a result of your already purchased Cloudflare relationship. And here's the type of results that we see, for similar size customers. So we've just started to do that. I don't know how we don't have the numbers yet to see how it's going to do, but yeah, we're very interested to see how that plays out. We also do really well in sites that are very heavy in JavaScript. So that's something that we have done pretty regularly.
And so with the outflow, you're driving traffic to your site. Are you pixeling them and running any retargeting campaigns to drive to webinars or educational content or any other parts of your funnel?
Yep. Yep. We use Kickfire, and then we use Perfect Audience as a display network for retargeting. Yeah, a lot of the stuff, actually I was very sort of familiar with that stuff from my Overstock days. So what's been fun now is I can actually like put my marketing hat on.
Yeah.
Because we really wanted to fly under the radar for the first 2 years, and just really in the last 6 months I've got to think about marketing Huckabuy, which is actually like my strong suit, and I've never really done it at Huckabuy. So it's
Yeah.
been fun to sort of like figure out the new tools and like what the best display networks are and what's the best retargeting, software and so on and so forth. So yeah, we're into all that stuff, which is fun.
Do you have an opinion on Perfect Audience over AdRoll? I'm assuming Perfect Audience because you didn't say you signed up with AdRoll.
Yeah, I haven't used AdRoll. We definitely compared them. We went with Perfect Audience, and we're very happy. Yeah. I
Okay.
learned a lot of sort of like secret sauce around display ads at Overstock and how you could reach a ton of people. Display ads are interesting in that they're extremely undervalued. So most people, when they look at display, they think of it as another digital channel, when in fact it's totally different, because most people don't click through display ads. So if you're analyzing your display campaigns like you analyze your paid search, they're just apples and oranges. So as a result, display ads actually end up being way cheaper than they probably should be. They're much more branding in a sort of branding tool than a direct response tool. And so you can just sort of figure out where you can get display ads very cheap these days. You have been for like 10 years.
And are you paying for them on a CPC basis? Is that why they're cheap, because you're not getting that many clicks, or is it just a really low CPM that you're paying?
It's a really low CPM.
Yeah. Okay. All right. With respect to your email outreach, these campaigns, as you mentioned earlier on, need to have multiple emails. So you need to have an email tool that'll do that for you. Which one did you pick?
We use Outreach.
Outreach.io.
Yep.
Okay. Was there any particular compelling reason why you picked that over Replyify or QuickMail or any of the other ones?
Familiarity. So some of our first AEs, account execs and sales, were very familiar with Outreach. And so it was just like, let's get them on a product that they understand and they can use right out of the gate.
Yep. Okay. With respect to crafting the messaging in the emails, was there a particular process that you followed? Because the wording that you use, words matter in copywriting. And so if you're not using the words that your customers are using to describe their problems, their goals, their challenges, you're not going to do as well. How did you figure out what words to use?
I still write probably 95% of our email copy personally.
Okay.
It's very important. It's kind of funny. So we've done a bunch of email campaigns, and we got one campaign that this very great like marketing, I'm struggling to remember his name right now, but he's an influencer, and he has a blog, and especially around B2B emails, and he called our email sequence the best B2B outreach email sequence he'd ever seen. And why? And he wrote it must have taken this guy 2 to 3 days to write about our outbound email.
That's how I found it.
And that's right. And it was funny because the email campaign that he wrote about was actually one of our least successful campaigns that we've ever done. Mm-hmm. But it was clever. It was very clever. And we had done something like, you do have to get so creative. I think the email campaign was essentially the SVP, Bart, the SVP of sales, forwarding me an email that we had written that looked like, it was like showing how important SEO was for B2B software companies, and that, for the top companies, it was over 75% of their revenue came through organic search. I mean, we wrote the whole thing, and then he forwarded it to me. And so I then would forward it to our list, but it was coming from a different, I have 2 email addresses. One I actually use, and the other is just for outbound.
Yeah.
And then we would follow up on it, and it was clever. It didn't actually do that well, but it ended up kind of going viral for a while. And we got a bunch of links to our site as a result of it. That was pretty cool. But yeah, you got to get creative, there's so much that flows through your inbox, right? If you're in any sort of executive position. And I've been hit up since I started at Overstock. So I feel like I sort of have a sense for what people will respond to. And it's, one of the things that's really a lost art in business, in my opinion, is writing. So it's hard to find kids coming out of school or whatever that are really good writers. And really good writers are worth their weight in gold. Like they can do so many wonderful things. And if you're, the CEO or whatever of a company, and you feel like you're the only one that can really write well, that's a lot of work that you're gonna have to do, whether it's case studies or it's press releases or whatever. So fortunately, we've now got some good writers, whether they're in sales or marketing. But what a lost skill set, and what an important one, in my opinion. My mom was an English teacher. I'm named after Geoffrey Chaucer, Jeff with a G. So I come from like a really strong background in English and in writing. And so I have a sort of big appreciation for the importance of writing and what it can do to a business, honestly, is kind of for a lost art, I would say.
It is indeed. And I'm actually, sidebar, so that email campaign that they wrote about that I discovered you, we ended up using our version of exactly that campaign.
Oh, no kidding.
And
great.
It sucked. It got no results at all.
I know.
And I was like,
we laughed so hard because it got so much attention, and it was like, no, it actually didn't work out well at all. And I went on his podcast too afterwards about it, and I was like, yeah, it didn't work at all. So
yeah. But it was clever. It was super
clever.
clever the way the emails was, because it conveyed authority and all sorts of really, it didn't reek of marketing at all.
No,
I didn't send it to a big sample set. I was actually doing an experiment as a part of determining some of our marketing positioning for one of my companies. I really needed some survey responses to a 3-question survey, and I'd met about 35 people at a trade show I'd just been to. So I sent this email campaign that we're talking about to these 35 people, thinking, well, gosh, they've met me. Sure that they'll respond. I got one response.
Yeah, it's funny. I always used to do this I kind of love it because I think about how many people read that article and how many people like yourself have probably used the exact same, like literally the exact same copy. It's probably like a ton of people now.
Yeah.
And I used to do this stuff at Overstock where I'd meet with like, the CMO of eBay or whoever. And I'd always like tell them stuff that was like, I'd be like, oh, paid search is just killing it for us. We're doubling down on paid search when all we cared about was organic and email and all that. So we would give sort of this like misdirection to our competition of like what we were going for. And that was sort of part of my job, was figuring out what they were doing and then misdirecting what we were doing. And I feel like that campaign is sort of like that, where there's probably all these like software sales execs that have copied and used that email, and they're still getting no results.
Love it. So in your more successful campaigns, what type of call to action would you normally have? Book a call, watch a video? What are you trying to get people to do?
That's something that it's book a call. That's something that we got to get a lot better at. So one of the things that's tough, or was tough, about Huckabuy was there was really nothing to see. So we were behind the scenes, sort of the company that would communicate a website to Google. So you couldn't really demo the product.
Yeah.
Now we have a dashboard and all this stuff that's kind of cool to see, but it was hard because you couldn't like physically, in any way see the product in action. So that was something that we had to kind of work through. And now we have a dashboard that we can do demos, and we can demo SEO Cloud. But we probably haven't done enough thinking around sort of that call to action. But right now it's typically like, the call to action is like, I personally will be on the call. And that's sort of like the opportunity to just like talk search with someone that's, I guess someone that an SEO expert at this point. So that's sort of the call to action now, but I think we could probably do a lot better.
Okay. And at this point in time, how many emails a week do you think you guys are sending?
We're pretty light right now because our pipeline's pretty good, but I think probably around like 400 to 500 emails a week is our normal, but we're probably below that right now.
Okay. And to get all those addresses, And to verify all those addresses, how do you do that?
Yeah,
And
I think they
two-part
use,
question.
yeah.
Actually, that part. And are you sending from your primary domain, or are you sending from a subdomain or a variation to protect your sender score?
We are sending from our primary domain. We use Zoom info, and I'm not sure what we use for the scrubbing, but I know we use something.
Okay. All right. That question I already asked you. You already answered that one. So tell me about a mistake, or as many mistakes as you would like, because that's where our greatest lessons come from, that
Mm-hmm.
you made early on in outreach.
Oh man. Yeah. So the very first mistake was right off the bat. We had an investor that was a very he's a great guy. He was a sales leader. He ran sales at a great B2B company that sold. And he's like, I have this guy that's just phenomenal at Outbound, and he would do, something like 100 phone calls a day and like 200 emails or something like that.
Wow.
And he worked for 3 months and we got nothing, not a single lead. And I was just like, I don't know why, they were in a different industry. And I was just like, this isn't, even after like 2 months, I was like, this just isn't going to work. This isn't a dial for dollars type of product.
Yeah.
When was the last time, you took a cold call and answered your cell phone? Like, I've never done that in my career.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, it's just annoying. So had to quickly, I had never been in sales before, right? I ran marketing at Overstock, where you don't even meet your customer. They just buy stuff, and you see all these millions of dollars and clicks and all this stuff happening. But so I had to sort of put on a whole different hat and think about, well, like, I was in this seat, right? Now, what would I have answered, or what would I have been interested in? One example for us is, like, we've gotten rid of the title account executive, and now we're transitioning, but we really are looking for, like, what we call technical SEO experts, because you're much more likely to take a call if you're an SEO guy from a technical SEO expert than you are from an account executive.
Yeah.
So we're realizing it's becoming a very technical sale. We can't approach it from a really like salesy account exec. We're not selling, CRM software. We're not selling, disaster recovery stuff. This is a very technical sale. And so we've really kind of kept pivoting to try to get that right. But I think that sort of, you got to be creative, and you got to think about what's going to make them interested to take that initial call, and then what do you got to do to be able to close. And so there's so many factors in that process, but each one is probably unique to every single company that's been successful, right? They all need one or two early stage growth hacks that'll get them, to whatever level, and then they got to keep that going. And there's so we think about that every day. How do we get more people in the door? How do we get more people trusting our brand and thinking about our product and wanting to just buy? And the ultimate vision is, like, we don't have to have a sales process at all. Someone can they know that Huckabuy is like, if you don't have Huckabuy, you're not doing SEO very well. And so it's like, there was a time when Google had people calling me at Overstock selling me AdWords, and then like 6 months later, it's like, if you didn't have AdWords, you weren't competing anymore as an e-commerce player. We want to get to that point where it's like, people realize if you don't have Huckabuy, you're really not competing anymore from an SEO perspective. It's like an automatic buy. But that's, it's a big ask, but that's sort of the goal.
Hey, you got to have big goals.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you know what your cost per booked call is?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Probably should, but it's mainly manpower. It's not a ton of we don't do a ton of ad spend. So
yeah. Okay. Do you know what your initial call to conversion rate is, like initial calls that convert to a customer?
I believe it's around 10%, but this is just, I think, the last time I saw it.
Okay.
One of the issues that we have is that SEO software is in a lot of ways a nice to have. And so people don't, if you're switching your email software from MailChimp to Campaign Monitor, you have like a drop dead date where you have to make the switch. We don't have that luxury of there's like, it's a very easy thing to put off. And so that's one of our biggest challenges that we think about a lot, is like, how do we add some urgency to that close? And in my mind, it's really simple. Like, every day that goes by that you're not on our product is a day that you're not growing, and as a result, you're losing revenue. But it's amazing how many marketers don't think that way. That's what I was taught, how to, you had to make a decision quick when it comes to this type of stuff, because if it really works out, then if you make a 6-month delay, you miss 6 months worth of really great growth. And our average customer grows 61% in 12 months. So that's sort of the urgency that we're trying to get through, is that, every day that you delay, you're costing yourself revenue.
Mm-hmm. When someone does book a call, can you walk me through, just kind of at a high level, what the flow of that call looks like? Like, how does the sales rep open the call? What do they talk about in the first bit of the call? When do they transition to the pitch?
Mm-hmm. So, the beginning is often a little bit of due diligence, getting to know what their SEO looks like today, what's sort of their technical level of understanding, and just trying to kind of figure out a way to, get them to share, right, some information with us. And then typically we will start addressing similar customers that fall into their category or industry, and how they've used Huckabuy to, achieve great success. And then we get into the products, and then we get into sort of demo and making sure, not everybody knows about dynamic rendering, for example. So there is quite a bit of education that needs to happen in that initial call. And really our conversion point after that is doing a free, what we call opportunity analysis. So we actually will look at their site versus 4 of their competitors and tell them, like, who's winning, who's losing, what's the potential upside, some stuff about their own site. And that's really how we get onto a second call, which, if everything goes well, we actually have the proposal ready and have the opportunity to close on the second call.
Got it. Okay. So in our pre-interview, I asked if you would be able to come up for any type of special offer or whatever, for in case there's anyone in my audience who's listening to this and they're thinking, oh yeah, hey, Max, I'd like to talk to these guys. Were you able to come up with anything?
Yeah, 20% off. So 20% off rack rate for anybody. Just fill out a contact us form at huckabuy.com, and we'll make sure and mention your podcast. And then, they'll get, I'll make sure that I'm on the call too. So sort of twofold, I'll be on the call. And second, if you do end up purchasing, we'll give you 20% off.
And the 20, just so they know, that there's no referral fee for me in this. I think you guys are doing something that's really valuable. And whenever I interview somebody that's doing that, I like to help them. So, Geoff, thank you so much for making some time to come and chat. And I look forward to, I'm actually coming out to Utah with my UTV. You ever heard of Rally on the Rocks out at Moab?
No, but I have a sense, like, 4-wheeling down in Moab.
Yeah, I'm actually not coming for the event. I'm going to come. It's either before or after with one of my buddies from Canada. Anyway,
that's cool.
And you live in Park City, right?
Yep.
Yeah. How far? I don't know off the top of my head. How far is it from Moab to Park City?
It's like 4 or 5 hours. But you might be coming through. You might be coming through. If you come through Salt Lake, we're 30 minutes from Salt Lake. So
yeah, I'll have to grab a beer with you when I come out that way.
I would love that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Trent. Thanks for having me.